All right, we are set. We're recording in 3, 2.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. So welcome for today's Spending Affordability Advisory Committee. And I think we're on the 4th meeting today. So I'm very pleased to invite our speakers. We have 2 groups that are here today to discuss 2 important subjects for the committee. The first is a team led by Superintendent Mr. Barnes, and welcome on board. And they will brief the committee on the superintendent's proposed budget for FY26 for both operating and CIP. And the second is a business panel discussion hosted by EDA in collaboration with Chamber of Commerce. So thank you for our speakers for joining us today. Before we get started, I also want to say we received 1 piece of information from DPZ, essentially to replace 2 original slides shared last week. There's just some coding errors there, so resulting in a 1 number discrepancy in fiscal year 2024, calendar year 2024. So the first one, the number of pre-submission committee meetings here, 2024, the replacement information should be 23, not 20. And then in terms of the new units proposed for 2024 is 442, not 100. So just want to let you know. This doesn't really change the story. It still kind of drops significantly compared to historical level. But I just want to put that in record, and we'll also put it in shared folder for the committee so you have access to that. So I just want to make sure I bring that up. With that, I will hand it over to Mr. Barnes and let us know who you want to run from the slides from your screen. I think, by the way, you're all speakers. You can just push the share and do that from your own screen. Thank you very much.
Sandy, good morning, Dr. Stein. Good morning, committee members. Brian Hall will put up the presentation in just a moment, and I'll be excited to present a brief overview of our FY 2026 operating and capital budgets. So as soon as that presentation comes up, I'll get started. Okay, let's go ahead and begin. So I have a few members of my team online too, so thank you to Mr. Hall, our new Chief Financial Officer. Thank you to Mr. Brown for joining us, our new Chief Operating Officer new this year. And if there are other staff, Mr. Conforti or otherwise, I apologize. I can't see everyone right now, but a lot of hands, as you know, go into making this budget. I'm appreciative for each of them. Just a couple weeks ago on January 9th, I presented our proposed fiscal year 2026 operating budget to the Board of Education. And that presentation and the full budget proposal can be found on our website. So additionally, we put together, like we did last year, a budget toolkit that we posted online to provide sort of a skinnier version or easier way for the community to understand our proposed budget. Just last week, we kicked off our first budget work session, which included a review of revenues and expenditures that are contained in the proposal. And that presentation can also be viewed online. There are several more work sessions scheduled, including one for this afternoon, and public hearings. All of those will take place between now and February 27th, when our Board of Education is scheduled to adopt their requested fiscal year 2026 operating budget, capital budget, and their 2026 to 2031 capital improvement plans. So we'll kick off this conversation by first just looking back 1 year at the 2025 operating budget, just to provide some context and to establish a starting point for the fiscal year 2026 discussion. So as you can see on slide 2, in fiscal year 2025, our budget grew by 3.7%, using a 1.7% increase in state funding, a 6.2% increase in county funding, and a 26.7% increase in other revenues. But that big jump represents just a really small portion of our total revenues. Additionally, I was pleased last year that we decreased our reliance on the use of fund balance to pay for recurring costs by a factor of by a 45.5%. Much like the county, we're trying to break our dependency on using one-time funds for recurring costs, and one day it's our hope that we can do just that. The headlines from last year's very emotional and volatile budget were that we were having to cut programs and positions in order just to balance the budget. And that was because last year the expenditure growth outpaced revenue growth to the tune of $31.1 million. In the end, that resulted in a net decline of about 60 full-time positions, which reduced our central office staff by 10%, which put us significantly below our counterparts in other districts our size in Central Maryland. And those reductions are being felt in significant ways by school staff, students, and families. We also raised class size, which decreased positions, although not people. Some of the 60 people in central office were people that had experienced a reduction in force, something that is not typical for the school system. And while this year has been difficult, as I alluded to, because of those reductions, I'm excited to say that we start off in a much better position because of that hard work when we think about our 2026 operating budget proposal. We're taking a look at projected increases in state aid cautiously, because we know that those projections will change as we get our final our updated state projections from the state. And this past October, we started the budget development process by providing our fiscal outlook to the Board of Education. And here's what we determined as a planning team at that time. First, the fiscal year 2026 budget would have to begin by navigating the strains of past budget cuts. And we had to begin the year by first making up the gap that we created ourselves by using $24.6 million in one-time funding to balance our budget last year, and to pay for ongoing service costs that will have to be funded this year. To maintain current levels of service next year, we have to fold this deficit into our calculation, and that will result in consuming a large part of new projected revenue before we can even consider adding to programs, expanding existing programs, or thinking about increasing compensation markers for employees. Additionally, we have to think about funding mandates, those dedicated dollars associated with the blueprint for Maryland's future. We're adding another grade to Guilford Park High School. And because we have reduced walk zones back to their pre-pandemic, pre-2022 levels, cost for student transportation will increase, as will health benefits and the cost of insurance. At the same time, thinking forward, we're experiencing, as we go around and we consider what our needs might be, identifying our priorities in special education, staffing and services to students, safety and security of our campuses, and contending with this current year is the last year that we receive funding from the Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, or ESSER grants. We have a lot of expiring grants coming off our books this year, some of which were used to pay for increases in recurring costs. So we'll talk about, some of the, putting all that together and listening to many, many staff and students and community members who attended multiple community input sessions. Here's what we prioritize. We're bringing forward essentially what we're calling a same services budget that accounts for all of those dedicated dollars and that use of one-time funding first, and then seeks to add the following. We're prioritizing retaining all employees, current employees, without reductions. So that's a plus from last year and certainly a headline. We're seeking to increase support and staffing for special education, because while our enrollment has remained relatively flat, our population of students receiving special education services and the complexity of their needs have increased in volume over the past 5 years, and significantly. And we weren't staffed to formulate at that time. So we've been playing catch up for some time in special education. It also prioritizes honoring our high quality staff through compensation increases and benefits, so we can remain competitive with those around us. And we have this budget increases support to enhance our safety and safety of our students and staff, thinking about what that looks like at each school. Additionally, the fiscal year 2026 budget recommendation maintains class sizes, so it does not propose a balancing strategy to increase class sizes. And it does not propose to impact most current programs and services, including gifted and talented education, fine arts, library media, and the opportunities that are provided at the Howard County Conservancy and other programs. I mentioned those because those were all programs that were recommended to be cut or reduced in last year's budget season. Our recommendation also commits to implementing expanded student transportation costs, as I mentioned earlier. In total, the proposed fiscal year 2026 budget is $1.219 billion, which reflects
Hey, hello.
Looks like we just lost the connection with them.
Yeah, let's give a little bit time.
Good morning, everyone. This is Brian Hall. I just
Yeah,
got
go
a
ahead.
text from Mr. Barnes. His computer restarted, so you got to love technology.
Yeah, that's
So
fine.
he apologizes. Mandatory restart, it sounds like. So I'll carry on for the next couple of slides here until he's able to rejoin us.
Okay, sounds good. Thank
So
you.
as Mr. Barnes was sharing, the proposed budget for next year is $1.219 billion. This is an increase of $74.3 million in expenses above what we had in the current year, about 6.5%. It adds 68.1 positions. Virtually all of those are either in safety and security and or special education, with a few others in transitioning back from grants that we had during COVID. So if we have $74.3 million in new budgetary expenditures, and as Mr. Barnes, mentioned earlier, about $24.6 million in one-time funding in the FY25 budget that creates a hole that needs to be filled first. How does the proposed budget propose that we get there? So starting with the largest piece, which is the above MOE request from the county, $67.1 million. We're also projecting an increase in state aid of $24.8 million. Although that, of course, will be impacted by the budget that the governor just released. And so our team is feverishly crunching those numbers and trying to figure out what exactly that impact will be. And of course, we don't know what's going to come out on the other end of the legislative process. And so we're doing our best estimates now, and we'll actually be sharing tonight with the Board of Education in our second work session with them on the FY26 proposed budget, some updates on what we believe the impact of what's been released currently would potentially be to the system. So let's look at enrollment. This is obviously a big driver, certainly of state funds. And then, as we've discussed in this committee many times, also impacts the capital budget, the need for space, and a number of other issues. And so I want to just point out here that these numbers, and I want to make sure I'm saying this right, these numbers are what the budget enrollment is based on. So they actually lag 1 year. And so you can see the peak that built the FY21 budget actually represents the enrollment in the fall of 2019. And that's when we peaked with our enrollment prior to COVID. And, of course, just like every district in the state and, virtually every district around the country saw a significant decline during COVID. And while we've rebounded and stabilized, certainly have not, and again, similar to most districts in the country, have not rebounded fully to where we were pre-pandemic. And as was discussed last week, part of that is due to the percentage of students enrolling in public schools has declined slightly as people have explored other options. And then, of course, the birth rate and all of the other demographic trends that were discussed in previous meetings. And Mr. Barnes should be back on shortly here. He apparently had some updates that were running. So you know how technology can be, even after 5 years of doing this stuff virtually. So the proposed budget, the priorities that are not included. So as Mr. Barnes shared, this really is a same services budget. We're trying to deal with these increased costs, both for employee compensation and general inflation, and still provide the same services next year that we're providing this year. However, we realize that the need is much greater than that, and there are many additional programs and investments that we would like to make, but did not feel that, you know, given the fiscal state of the county, it would be prudent to include some of these things at this time. But certainly athletic trainers is something that has been a conversation within the community for a while, making sure that our young athletes have the resources that they need. Human resources position, as Mr. Barnes mentioned, there were significant cuts to central office last year. In a district this big with, 8,000 employees, we certainly need additional supports in human resources. Additional compliance, you know, the federal government and state continue to pass down mandates to us, many of them unfunded. And so there are positions that are needed to meet those requirements. Additional school administrators, assistant principals at a number of schools, that has been a place there where there's been a desired investment for a number of years, and because of fiscal reasons have not been able to do that. The Passages program, providing additional supports there. Dual enrollment with Howard County Community College. Administrative and secretarial support, certainly a need for that both at the school level and at the central office. Operating positions, there is a number of these that were cut last year, custodial and maintenance, and certainly our community is telling us that we would love to see those restored. Teaching specialists and coaches, if we want to make significant progress academically, we need to have experts in the field supporting our teachers and our young people. So that is definitely a need of us and most school systems. Additional compensation, we are in negotiations right now with the union, and certainly would love to be able to increase our compensation marker, but financial limitations there as well. And then as everybody, or many people I'm sure are aware, we have significant deferred maintenance across the district that needs attention. So here's some resources on the operating budget. A QR code that will take you right to our budget page, the address there, and then a little one-pager here. And so that closes out the portion of the operating budget. I'm kind of stalling to see if Mr. Barnes has made it back on. Otherwise, I'll ask Mr. Brown to pick up on the next slide to discuss the capital budget.
Good morning, everyone. Yes, I can do that. Brian, can you hear me? I was having some problems with my
Yeah, you're fine.
audio.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Good morning, everyone. Cornell Brown, Chief Operating Officer with Howard County Public School System. So I'll pick up on the capital budget process. As you're aware, with the capital budget, we work to balance the needs of the school system with funding. So our staff constantly, we look at available funding with our local government and from our state government to balance the needs, priorities, and requirements of the school system. So our current project evaluation criteria looks at our capacity and our program needs and our aging facilities and the condition of our buildings. We have some information from the state. They did a facilities conditions assessment some years ago that identifies the deficiencies within our school facilities. And what we're doing is taking a look at our buildings to determine what our program requirements are. So looking at the fiscal parameters for our school district, we work to balance the available funding with the needs of our buildings. Next slide, please. So we have challenges, within our capital program, and with our feasibility study and FY23, we took a look at our capital needs, and we're looking to move forward with what we need to do in order to balance enrollment. Obviously, with the requirements of the blueprint, we look to balance our capital program with the needs of the expansion of our pre-K programs and other requirements like CTE and wraparound services. Our special ed program is one of our, most needy programs where the requirements of our special needs population is growing. So the requirements that we need to accommodate these programs are at the forefront of our thinking. So with those growth challenges, meeting the needs of our students, we need to make sure that our capital program keeps pace. As Mr. Hall had mentioned, our deferred maintenance requirements are just something that we need to make sure that we account for in the capital program so that we can, reflect that in our requests to local and state government. As we all know, our assets are aging. When we struggle with keeping pace fiscally, and we don't keep up with the replacement cycle of our facilities and our building system, roofing system, mechanical systems, these systems do age out. And we have 80 plus buildings that we, are required to maintain. And the challenges with, balancing the capacity requirements and program requirements and the aging infrastructure is what we, fight and battle with year to year when our fiscal requirements just can't, keep pace. Next slide, please. So one of the greatest factors that we've been, struggling with is the fact that as funding has remained flat, the cost of construction continues to rise. And this slide here pretty much shows that that line trajectory at the top reflects the cost per square foot for construction to include, building and site work and soft costs. But when you look at that lower line, you see the $416 a square foot. You're talking about the needs of construction without site improvements. So the cost of construction continues to rise. So the state has seen a 57% increase since FY 2018. And when you start to look at what we expect to receive from our local government and from our state government, and with the cost of construction, we're struggling to finance the needs, and we're struggling to finance what I call, cost of ownership. So coupled with the rising cost of construction, we also, have the change in the state cost share percentage. Since FY24, the state has changed its share percentage from a 50% state share to now what will be 51%. So the local share continues to increase, and the cost of construction, as you see, has increased. So that just creates additional pressures on our capital budget. So, we have from our local government, we were advised that we would receive between, 54 million in local funds. In the capital program, the state roughly $17 million a year is what we get on average from our state government. And then they did set aside some funding in the Build to Learn Act. We have $75.5 million of that remaining. And then there are some other programs, that some require local matches, some do not, like the Aging School program that will sunset shortly. But we received some additional funding with our school security grant program and our pass-through grant programs. So we pretty much, look at the needs, look at the fiscal dollars that are available, and we just try to balance that as we move forward. Next slide. So we presented, here what our long-range plan look over the next 5 years. So currently, as presented to our school board, the FY26 budget has some $86.7 million in requested funds. And we look to, modify this plan as we compile and collect additional data on our school facilities to include space efficiency evaluation that we're looking to complete. We are in front of the county council presently asking for funds to be transferred to allow us to complete this assessment. This assessment will evaluate how our buildings are performing, supporting our academic programs. Once we get that, we'll match that up with the state facilities assessment with our building conditions, age of roof, age of HVAC, age of our buildings, and the deficiencies and conditions. And then we will, revise this plan to reflect the needs based on the data that we have. But currently, as you see, we have projected out that we'll need, about 140 million annually in capital funds through FY34 to complete projects. And in our FY26 plan, you see that, projects like Oakland Mills and Faulkner Ridge and Dunlog and Oakland Mills High School, Patapsco Middle, and Murray Hill are projects that we have within our capital plan. And again, we'll look at the funds that come from our local government that's are available, and the Build to Learn Act funds from the state, along with the CIP, in order to finance those projects. So I think, Mr. Superintendent, that concludes the capital budget portion of the presentation. And I think we're open for questions, or I'll just turn it back over to you to, close out on some comments.
Yeah, just thank you. Apologize for the computer restart, and thank you, Mr. Hall, Mr. Brown. That was not how we haze new people. Just drop off in the middle of a presentation and require you to step in, but you did admirably. So yeah, we'll stand ready to answer any questions you may have as we dig into the nitty gritty and support this committee in any way we can. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown, and our colleagues from the school system. So for anybody in the committee, if you have any questions, you can just unmute yourself and raise that. I'll start with one more technical questions that has kind of raised some confusion in earlier conversation, other meetings or in the committee when it talks about the overall capital project and also the school capital project. There is some confusion related to two different, apparently, rates on capacity, the local rated capacity versus state rated capacity. That concept, I think, is still going to be important to clarify a little bit, because it does measure how crowded each of the school is, and that I assume it was going to transfer into the decision regarding that both the timing for expansion or new construction, and also how many seats might be needed. It might also, if the state rated the capacity, I guess it's also determining the eligible type of cost versus the part not eligible. Anyway, just like if if Cornell, you or someone in your team could just kind of help shed a little bit light on that, that will be helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. So state rated capacity versus our local rated capacity. So the state, when they calculate the number of seats available, they do not take into account programmatic requirements. So they're looking at square footage, and they're looking at size of building. They're looking at your enrollment, and they have their own formula for elementary, middle, and high schools on how much they are willing to fund based on grade level, program, and size of building and grade level program. But we have wraparound services and special needs programs and support services that we take into consideration. And so we have a local capacity number that takes in some additional factors that the state does not consider. So there's one for the state rated capacity for state funding. And then there are some local initiatives that are locally funded and managed. And they are, programs that, we would look to the county government, to fund because the state doesn't fund everything. So that's taken into account some of those other, wraparound services and programs that the state does not factor in.
And then so local rated capacity is really the school board decided, right? Or each individual school boards decide, basically.
Yeah. So local school districts, they have, everyone has their own academic program requirements and support service requirements that vary. And so the state does not manage those local decisions. They set standards for, instructional programs, but they don't get into those, local decisions on the program requirements in order to support special ed, in order to support CTE, in order to support your math programs, and your staffing levels and those things. So you have to take that into account also. So the state does not factor in community schools. So we have school facilities and communities where there are community schools identified. We have Title I programs, our special ed so there are a number of programs that vary from school district to school district, and you need to account for that. So you can go into an elementary school that with the state rated capacity, might look to have, some additional seats. But when you start looking at those, wraparound services that are being offered, the building still, seems, tight and compressed in terms of the utilization of its space. So the thing that, that we are going to do with our space efficiency evaluation is evaluate all of our buildings to identify how the buildings are being used relative to the programs that are assigned to those buildings. And then we'll revisit, our, local rated capacity figures, and then be able to, compare that with our state rated capacity, because we'll actually have that evaluation completed.
If I can ask a follow-up there. So just so we're clear, is local rated capacity formulaic, number one? And number two, can the formula be changed by the school board or staff without the review and consent of council and executive?
Yes. And I have Mr. Lubley here, but I'm on my Bluetooth here. So I'm going to ask him, a quick question.
I think can our IT host elevate?
Yeah, well, he just walked
Daniel,
in
I think
when Mr. Barnes went offline, he walked in. So, and I'm on my Bluetooth because I was having issues with, so I'm gonna try to change from my Bluetooth to my speaker so it can hear the question. and give us some historical context. So,
So Dan, are you able to speak, or can someone help elevate?
no. Okay. All right. Can you hear us? Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah, you're good. Hello?
I'm sorry. Can you restate that question?
Yeah, sure. The question is the local rated capacity formulaic? And if so, can it be changed year to year by the school board, or does it require a review and consent of the county council and the county executive?
From the council. We lost the end of your question, Mr. Audubon, but I think we got it.
So the local rated capacity is a methodology that is approved by the Board of Education. The Board of Education could change it every year if they wanted. That would provide inconsistency and would start to create confusion within the utilization. So it's not done every year, but it is a formulaic item. In the annual feasibility study, it does list for each level, elementary, middle, and high school, the calculations of how the capacities, the local rated capacities are shown. And then on subsequent pages, how the state rated capacities are calculated as well. That is an item that is a board decision. I do not believe that it does go in front of the county council for approval of the methodology, no.
I can tell you that it does not. It's strictly a local decision.
Local, Ellen, you mean local school board decision, not
It's a
local.
local school board decision, and it does not go before the council, but there certainly would be discussions and stuff if there was a significant change. But no, that's within the power of the board to address those, and they are laid out in the feasibility.
And of course, the reason I ask is the repercussions are significant for the county at large, and for the county's master plan for development going forward, because it's the local rated capacity that is provided in the schools chart. So the numerator is just the number of students. But if the denominator is always changing, even marginally, it can have a significant impact on what's happening in the development side of the county and county projections for revenues and spending going forward.
I can tell you that there have been times when individual schools have been, where capacities at individual schools have been adjusted based on a recommendation from the superintendent, and changes have been made that have not been made across the system. But the base is formulaic for most of it. But sometimes there are individual conditions at individual schools that might affect that capacity.
And Ms. Giles is correct. An example is this past year, there were several schools that did adjust when programs, as Mr. Brown was saying, as programs expand, those are things that we do need to take into account, and they do affect the capacity of the schools. So as those do, especially special education programs, they expand, the local rated capacities are reevaluated with the same methodology that's approved by the Board of Education, but to reflect those changes in those individual schools.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. These are really very helpful discussions on that, because it does has a lot of implication about capital budget, timing, and scope, and also which part is eligible, which part is not eligible for state funding. But it also, as Todd mentioned there, it would determine the timing for some new development, because that earlier for the committee meetings here, you heard the Hochul by design, and that the financial modeling from the consultant at that point was showing that new development does have net surplus revenue for local government, meaning that it brings more revenues than the cost on that. So that's the revenue used to support all the service and the capital projects on that there, because in Maryland, these new development are so much directly related to property tax, income tax, school surcharge, transfer accommodation tax, etc. So all this are sort of related. So I'm glad to hear that everything is getting reevaluated. They're trying to be looking into on that. Thank you everybody for chiming on that there. Any other questions from the audience? And go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to jump in with another one unless everybody else is done, but I'll defer if there are other hands up. So I'll jump in. Here's what I'm wrestling with, and I'm working over on the AFFO committee too, so I'm getting meeting to death. But over the last, say, 7 years since the peak enrollment, we've added 2,800 seats. We've added no students. Over the next 7 years through fiscal 33 or 34, we're adding another 2,000 seats, no new students. Over the last 5 years, our spending per student has gone up 30%. Where does it end? It seems like we're always behind the curve, and now we have 16 years of past and projected flat enrollment, and we're still not getting any closer to the amount of capital spending we need and the amount of operating spending we need. And I'm not clear on how that's possible in flat enrollment.
Yeah, so thank you for that question. Thank you for that question. I would welcome the opportunity to sit down with you to have a detailed discussion around capital planning and cost of ownership. We operate over 9 million square feet of building space. Our building systems, they age, and you have to plan for upgrades and replacement of building systems to begin with. So your capital investment and your capital program never slows down. It's a never-ending cycle. Buildings live, they have a life expectancy. Building systems, they each have life expectancies. So to begin with, there's just that, the cost of ownership that you, need to manage. And also programs have changed since these buildings were designed in, 1970s. So program requirements, have grown. So when you start looking at the needs of our, special needs students, and again, those wraparound services that are now being housed in our school buildings, it's just not only enrollment, the number of children that we are trying to accommodate. We're also accommodating the change in programs, making buildings available for our high school students who need to be career and college ready. Making our buildings, appropriate for our, early childhood development programs. Expansion of pre-K is one of those things. And then you also have to think that we do have pockets where there's development. It might not be that we have, growth throughout the entire county, but we do have growth within pockets of the school district. Where balancing enrollment might not be the answer. So there's a combination of making sure that we build facilities for our pre-K expansion. We modify our buildings for our special needs population. We also have to modify our buildings for the increased safety and security. We have to modify our buildings for the expanded technology requirements. And we have to replace roofing systems because they age out. And, it's 25 years later, the roof needs to be replaced. 25 years later, the HVAC system needs to be replaced. So you couple all, you kind of put all that together with the rising cost in construction. Again, 57% since 2018. There's the need. So we are going to lay that out in a way that is digestible because it is a lot, but it is not something that's uncommon. It's not something that's just Howard County is wrestling with. It's a national issue. It's an issue throughout the entire state. But we just need to do a better job at communicating that with the public so that there is an understanding. But it's complex, it's a complex thing to kind of wrestle with.
And Cornell, if I can add to that too, from the operating side, I know our per pupil, allocation or the county's investment has, gone up steadily for, year after year. But when we adjust for inflation, which, I think everybody after the past several years knows that is really what counts, because everything gets more expensive year after year. It's really how much can you buy next year compared to this year, which is why, we're seeing a significant increase in the operating budget just to support current programming. When you look at the inflation adjusted per pupil allocation, it's basically the same as it was 15 years ago. So the amount that the district has to spend has not increased, and yet we're being asked to add an entire another grade to the school system, the wraparound support, significant increases in special ed, technology requirements. We never had this, before COVID, that we were providing computers to every kid. So the demands on the system, the expectations have increased significantly. And when you look at the purchasing power adjusted for inflation, the funding has not kept pace.
So then if I'm to combine your two summaries, given the mission creep that Dr. Brown is referencing, and given that inflation adjusted, you're spending the same amount per pupil, we're actually getting more for our money now than we were 15 years ago.
I mean, it's hard to absolutely quantify something like that, but yes, I think it's fair to say that we're doing more with less or more with the same.
And what I fear is the county's population growth is less than 1% a year. I don't know how we can sustain 6-7% annual increases in education when our population growth is less than 1% and the historical average inflation rate is 3 or 3.5%. There's a huge gap there, and our spending per pupil, if it's going up by 6 or 7% with that inflation rate and that population growth rate, we're getting further and further behind, and we're asking the taxpayers of the county to pay more and more and more for the schools, and I don't know how that's sustainable.
So to put the discussion in context, I have one slide I want to show a little bit, then I'll go to Barb because I think she just raised her hand on that there. So I just want to clarify the county government has been doing our best to try to fund a school system here. The bar represent on the first chart here is represent annual change in county direct funding to the school system, the increase every year. That doesn't even including the county's funding for the debt service for the school capacities or the contribution to teachers' retiree health benefit on that. And you can see that between 2016 to 2022 on average, the growth of the county funding, direct funding to school system, hovering between 10 to 15 million. That almost tripled in the last 3 years. This have been $40 to $47 million a year. That's really unprecedented. And I want to say that that's the period that the county really beefed out our investment to the school system, understanding the needs, and that's the same time the student enrollment actually show a decrease in this period of time. It has been still haven't gone back to the historical level, and based on that, per student county funding increased by more than 26%, and overall school funding per student, including state funding, has been increased by almost 30% in this period of time. And my numbers was using what the schools published a number, but slightly different because I think the earlier presentation was showing eligible FT. Using that, actually, it will be even bigger growth per student. So I just want to say that I understand costs have been increasing, demands has been going up. I want to make sure that understand that the government has been doing a lot, and actually some of the growth there is partially benefit from the unusual surplus of funding from the federal stimulus and other elements that may not be sustainable on that there. But I want to just put that discussion in context about acknowledge the efforts the county government has been doing on that. Having said that, I want to get back to Barb because she has been waiting. Thank you. Barb Glenn, yeah, you have a question? Hey, Barb, you can
Good
mute
morning.
yourself.
Good morning. My name's Barb Glenn, Superintendent. Thank you so much for bringing this team to present to us. I really appreciate it. I would call myself sort of a newbie on looking at the details, although, of course, I'm a parent and I've had kids in the school system and really enjoy it. Thank you for the same services budget proposal. I just have a question. Where can I find the information regarding the proverbial pie chart that shows what percentage of that budget goes to salaries? What are the trends with that? What's the percentage of teachers, administrators, and support staff? And I do recognize you couldn't include, or you did not include, administrators and admin and secretaries in the FY26 proposed budget, at least not increases. But I'm just asking, where can I find that information? I heard you had 8,000 employees, and I'm just, focus on the people. The quality of our program is all about our people. So where can I find that?
I know Mr. Hall's probably, and good morning, is probably looking for the budget page number. It's in our budget book, and we'll get you a page number. But yeah, about 86% of our total budget is staff. And of that, the vast majority are school-based or school supporting staff, with about 1.3% of our total budget relegated for like administration.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I will look for that on the website. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if I could add, because I'm just listening to the questions, and I just want to just for the group, we received advice from our utility consortium consultant. Just like county government, we're a member of BRICPAC, and in July and August, they advised that utility expenses were rising like 26% come July 1 of this year. So just the cost of utilities, 26%. We operate our buildings, and we have to buy wax and paint brushes and HVAC equipment and electrical equipment. And we've seen, as we all know, rising costs of toilet paper and paint brushes and, electric wiring and such, ranging from 4% to 11% in cost for, widgets. And when you're repairing the systems in 78, 80 buildings, that becomes costly, and things break. Things need to be cleaned and maintained, and paper towels, and no different than at your home. The cost of the things that we're buying, I'm just shocked by the cost of lotion when I go to my local Target. And we're, struggling with that same thing here in the school district. So as Superintendent Barnes mentioned, 86% of our budget is staffing, the people, and they're most important. But then you know, a large portion of it are fixed costs, utilities and supplies and materials and paper and pencils. You know, we're not really getting into, you know, the real complicated, you know, components of our budget. We're just talking about, you know, hand sanitizer and soap and things of that sort. You know, it's costing us, and you know, the same, you know, budget is flat, but we're buying materials that might not be the same quality that it once was, but those things break quicker. I just wanted to, you know, raise that up for the group, because it's not only, you know, the cost of our staff, but it's also the cost of our supplies and material costs, and our budget is not reflecting, you know, those increases. Superintendent?
Barnes, go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Sun. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Yeah, I think that's, I think committees such as these who, you know, give of their time are so critically important to our school system, to our community, not just our school system, but our entire community. Dr. Sun, I want to echo and double click on what you said. The county government has been very generous in trying to help find creative creative solutions to escalating costs. I think they're experiencing it in terms of their own internal budgets, all parts of budgets. I think, you know, we you know, are large, or maybe the largest part of the county's budget, but do understand that we're not the only part of the county's budget, and that we fit into a piece of pie that needs to be handled, you know, strategically. And so I think, as I speak with the county executive and team, we're all, you know, we think about the task force that Ms. Giles is leading. It's really a community conversation about how do we manage going forward. We find ourselves in these positions at this time of the journey, and trying to reconcile those decisions that have been made historically with current conditions at the state level. And so there's no easy, straightforward path. We didn't get here in a day. We're not going to get out of this in a day. But cost containment, really try not to put forward every ask, you know, like not try to pit one group against another. That's what I'm really focused on as a leader of the school system, is what is the collaborative solution through this with the county government, with our constituents. We cannot continue to ask taxpayers to foot, you know, this is one of the most heavily taxed districts in the state already. And so I understand that's where revenue can come from, but what other choices, what other decisions are made? There are increasing demands. Maryland's Blueprint for Future is an exceptional reform that comes with extraordinary cost. And those funding escalators are outcompeting our local districts' ability to fund those things. The state, it's fine for the state to have those dollars, and this year we'll have less of those dollars. So they've run into the fiscal cliff as well related to that piece of legislation. So, but it's another thing for our local government to have to keep pace. And we're not going to be, or I'm not going to be a school leader who then cries poor when we know we're getting tens of millions of dollars annually over the budget. This is really is a fiscal management, being responsible for fiscal agents challenge, and it's a challenge nationally, statewide, but I'll focus locally because, you know, we have the right people. We just need to kind of figure this out and get controls in place. So I think better data, Mr. Brown talks about sufficiency studies. I think better data is going to help. I think continued collaboration with Dr. Sun and her team. We don't sit down and just lift this thing onto them and get out of the way and watch them flail around. We sit down and we think line by line how we might progress, and that's just what it's going to take. So we're fully committed to that, and we thank the county and the county council for their role in helping us understand how we fit.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barnes. We very much appreciate the collaboration and continue the. Any other question? I think for the sake of time, maybe we can do one more, and then we'll roll over to the business discussion.
Just one. And trust me, having sat on this committee for the last 7 years or so, we have rarely had the opportunity to have an extended discussion with school board or the school's leadership. So I can't tell you how much we appreciate that. And in line with what Mr. Brown said, I get it. I mean, we understand that toilet paper and lotion and eggs are all more expensive. But I would also venture to say that the 100% of the taxpayers of Howard County would love to have a 6.5% personal increase in their budget to help them deal with it. And at large, we don't. And when 100% of the taxpayers are funding 30% of the taxpayers that are using the schools right now, I think we have to be cognizant of the fact that the population at large is not experiencing anywhere near a 6.5% personal increase in their budget, while at the same time not having to deal with an increase in the number of students that they have to serve. So I think from a messaging standpoint, it's important to recognize that the general population is not benefiting anywhere near that much in their personal budgets that you're asking them to pay you. So to cite your increased costs of toilet paper probably isn't the most effective way to present your situation. And I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that. That's any support we can have on messaging or context is always helpful. So thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. Bill, Holly, I had my hand up. I don't know if you saw that. So
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Sean McGinnis here.
Apologize.
So Bill, I think you kind of alluded to it in your presentation, but the cost of employee compensation. And I know, nationally now, teachers unions are putting on a harder press with their contractual requirements and asks. And can you talk about what that impact is? Because I think a lot of times, not only is the compensation increase, but the requirements require hiring more staff. But maybe you can kind of just talk to us about what that impact is on Howard County, but also maybe address or, let us know what's been the change in overall staffing per student in the last 10 years. And what is that? And what do you see that changing in the future?
So, that's a lot of I won't be able to answer all those questions and 10-year trends and things. I can talk about compensation in general from a standpoint of I think appropriately and justifiably teachers, specifically all educators, but teachers and classroom paraeducators, coming out of COVID have really thought about their worth and relative worth in the space. It's a fine living when you pair it with pension, which is something that most Americans do not receive. It pays in different ways in different parts of your life. It's certainly a fulfilling career, and yet remaining competitive in compensation relative to peers or other highly educated peer groups, is lag. It just lags, and so what's affected us locally most dramatically is when the Maryland's Blueprint for the Future raised the minimum salary to $60,000, so starting salary. That was, a bold move. We worked aggressively to get there. We got there last year and even through a troubling budget season. But the tricky part here for us is that's a statewide floor, and $60,000 per year as a starting salary gets your dollar goes a lot further in Washington County or Allegheny County or Kent County than it does in Howard County. And so to remain competitive, we've always known since that law was passed, we'd have to go above that ceiling. And those costs that alone has increased. I feel like, Brian, I'm going to throw a number out, but it's going to be, we'll fact check on that. But I feel like it's been to the tune of 15 or 18 or 20% increase over the past 5 years, which is a significant, it makes up the largest portion of what the county has helped us fund when we've gone from when I started as chief academic officer, I feel like a $800 million total budget to a $1.2 billion total budget in just the last 8 years or so. So that it's a significant impact. I think it's justified in relative to other professions, but I think the cost is it's what we contend with. Last year we gave what was described by our partners as a poor effort at providing compensation increases, and just at in our largest bargaining unit, a 2.2% increase, 2.25% increase plus a step which aggregates out between a 2.25% raise for those at the top of the scale. Some people experience more closely to a 5% raise when you depending on where they are in the scale. But just that 2% in a step costs the district about $33 million. And so our compensation marker starts there this year. If we're negotiating, we haven't reached agreement. And so that's just every percent increase hits our budget to the tune of $8 to $10 million. And that doesn't even account for, we're seeing a $12 million uptick in costs for benefits and insurance this year. So it's the most significant, it's the largest part of our budget, and it seems to be the one that's growing the fastest.
Thank you very much. I just want to express our gratitude for Mr. Barn and the team from the school system joining us this morning. Thank you. And also thank you, the committee, for great questions, very informative. Next one will be Jennifer Jones. I think you will lead in the discussion on the business. Do you want me to share on the screen your slides? Oh, you are muted.
Morning. Thank you, Holly. Good morning, everyone. I'm joined with Christy Simons joining me from the president and CEO of the Howard County Chamber. She's joining me, so we'll be going through the slides, and I'll be talking a little bit about some of the economic indicators, and she'll be adding her perspective. Also, we have the business panel afterwards. One person, Bethany Hobbs, she's from McKenzie Commercial Real Estate, so she'll be able to answer any commercial real estate related questions for anyone. And then we have someone from Ryan Miller from Edwards Performance Solutions, and that company is a federal contractor. They have federal contracts, so I know that's a space that we're all kind of have questions about, and so he'll be able to answer anything from that perspective. So we'll go to the first slide. The next one, thanks. Keep going. All right, thanks. So Howard County population continues to see growth, but as we've all been discussing, it's been slowing since 2021. Over the 10-year perspective, if you want to look on long term, the growth is still nearly double that of the U.S. as a whole and more than double that of the state. But we are slowing down in our growth rate. Next slide. So with respect to GDP growth, Howard County between 2022 and 2023, our GDP growth grew about 3.5%. We outpaced all the other central Maryland counties and overall places us 6th in Maryland counties. And so I know that over the last year, the governor all the way down to local jurisdictions have been talking about our GDP growth for Maryland and how it's behind that of the state of the nation. And so I think it's it's good for all of us to kind of look at that at the county level and at the state level to see ways that we can increase our growth. Next slide. So this is the 1-year estimate for our median household income, and from the previous 2022 estimate, Howard County has advanced from 12th to 8th highest median income in the nation. Next slide. So the next slide, so this right here, you can see the growth in terms of growth in median income. It increased nearly 6%, making us the 2nd fastest growing county out of the 15 largest earners. So our median income in Howard County continues to grow, which is a good thing. But the next slide, please. You'll see in context, though, housing prices have also continued to grow in Howard County. We're the blue line there. We remain higher than the state and the U.S. Average. It's not surprising given the amenities and educational assets and our proximity to DC and Baltimore. But we know that housing costs is an issue for us. And go to the next slide. If you look in this context in terms of growth, over the last 10 years, home price increases in the U.S. and Maryland have accelerated at a faster rate than Howard County. So we are growing, but at the state, our housing prices, as a whole, are going pretty quickly. And Howard County actually has not grown as fast as the other the state. The next slide. All right, so this slide shows our post-pandemic resident employment recovery. Total employment is down slightly from last November. the Howard County employment rate is the second lowest in the state. But we have, a good thing is we've added back about 1,500 workers to our labor force. I mean, obviously, although our employment rate is low, employers are still struggling somewhat with hiring, skilled workers in certain positions. But I think it's loosening up a little bit. And then anecdotally, I've talked to some businesses, and they've also, like especially in the hospitality industry, which they've struggled a lot. They're saying that it's not as bad as a year ago trying to hire people in certain positions. So that's a good outlook for us. I don't know, Christy, please jump in if you have any other observations that you want to add. And the next slide. Next. So this chart shows the change in employment at Howard County, state and U.S. employment relative to pre-pandemic employment. And Howard County is still 1% short of recovering all the lost jobs since the pandemic. And we lag behind the state and the nation. And this is driven by workforce availability and a number of other factors. So although we're recovering, our pace, and we've been adding workers back to our labor force, our pace is slower than the state. Next slide. So the industry growth here. So the orange bar represents our total employment by industry, and the blue bar shows the net change in employment since January 2020. And you can see that our biggest growth sector post-pandemic was professional and business services. So that's that top line. And you can see, and that's our biggest industry in Howard County. I think it's about 28% of the employment in the county. So we are a big professional services firm, which I'm sure you all know. And then you see our poorest performing sector is the trade, transportation, and utilities and financial activities sectors. So you can see that those two sectors have actually, the employment change has decreased. The next slide. Okay, so this slide shows some of our industry sectors that are struggling on the employment side. On a positive note, some of those sectors are still growing in firms. So for instance, if you look at, let's go down to financial services, we see that employment change is negative. That's the blue line. However, the firms are growing. So that means to me that we are getting smaller firms, maybe entrepreneur, 1 and 2 people firms, or they're smaller firms that are coming online, or the same firms, although they've lost some employees, they might have downsized during the pandemic, they're doing a lot more with less. So that seems to be, so that's a good point. Even though it's not good for the labor force, but in terms of these businesses, they're still thriving in these sectors, in that they're still forming. There's more of them, coming online, but in terms of workforce, they may not have the same number of workers pre-pandemic.
Just one quick clarification. So basically, Donovan, you're saying that the business are overall some still be developing, but they hire less people for some of them.
Correct.
Okay.
And there might be existing firms that have less employees than they had pre-pandemic, but they're still there, right? So, yeah.
Got it. And then the information, is that IT or is it different? The information sector, the definition?
Yeah, so I'll look at you, sorry. Yeah, that's IT. Look at
Jennifer, if I can jump in, it's publishing, web design. It's a variety of news providers, information providers, less of technology, more of, when you think of it, of classical information, in that publishing, web publishing, and that sense.
I think, the IT is up under professional and business services at the top.
Oh, I see. I got it. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification about where it belongs. So it's interesting because on the one side, the business side, it overall seems to be thriving, although with exceptions on that. But in terms of employment, which does transfer to jobs and personal income, that actually is quite somewhere on the negative side.
Right.
Thank you.
The next slide. So you can see our total establishments in Howard County. That's just the trend. We're about at about 12,000 establishments. That has been growing. And so we are consistently adding new businesses, and a lot of our programs from the EDA, we do a lot of services that help, wraparound services for entrepreneurs, making sure that we help cultivate that that pipeline. So I think like over the last 3 years, we've added more than 1,600 establishments. So we want to accelerate that and make sure that we're making sure that if people want to start a business, they can, and they have the resources to do that. And that definitely helps our economy. And business starts, feeding the growth of the establishments in the county. This is the new business starts. We've had a record number of starts over the last 3 years. In the most recent year, it's the second highest level on record. So these are the number of people that are coming in. They're trying to start new businesses, they're registering with the state for new businesses in Howard County.
Do you have a size of those businesses? Like, is it?
I don't know, Zach, do we have that broken down by like the size of the businesses and by employee levels?
Unfortunately, we don't. I can tell you with a high level of certainty that most of them are going to be single, like self-employed businesses. Just if you look, we've got 5,000 per year coming online, and if you look at our net growth in businesses, that's almost 50% of our businesses right there.
Yeah, I mean,
so a lot of it.
Do we know if they're like, I guess, revenue? I mean, it's not just employment size; it's like revenue size. That these are going concerns and not just somebody doing DoorDash.
Sure. So I'm sure you already know it's fairly easy to register a new business. So a lot of them are going to be, or a number of them are going to be, very optimistic. I'm going to start a business, and it never comes to fruition. But if we had a bellwether, this would be it of how many people are getting into that start a business mindset and actually taking the steps to do it. So it's not a perfect 1-for-1 by any means, but it is an indicator of how many people are coming into this entrepreneurship ecosystem.
And yeah, it's like Zach is saying, it's a numbers game, right? You have a lot of businesses that, you're right, in the first couple of years, they start and they don't survive, but it's a numbers game. I mean, you get the more people you have through that pipeline, and we do what we can to help those businesses succeed, the more we'll have.
Do we have any major businesses where we can actually count more employees than the person that's starting the business?
But can you say your question again?
Do we have any businesses that have new businesses that have significant employment opportunities? I mean, these startups that are just one person don't really contribute much to the community. I don't think they maybe long-term they will, but I'd be more interested in what we've been able to recruit of some size into the community.
So we do have an attraction part of our business, and we do have like businesses that come from another state, or they're even internationally, that are looking to be they want to be somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic, and they come to Maryland and they want to figure out which county to be in. And so we have a team that works on business attraction, and we have several businesses that have, like, we have one, I think, ribbon cutting next week. So a new business that's coming in, it's 100 jobs. So like further down, you'll see some of the slides where like you have businesses where actually there's like significant jobs they're contributing right away to the economy. But I think it's both. We need those attraction elements where they are like, a lot of jobs coming along right away. And then we also need an entrepreneurial pipeline because we need businesses in all part of the life cycle in Howard County. And then it also helps our quality of life. I mean, we have people moving into Howard County because they want to, the public school system is great, the quality of life is great, and they also want to start a business and raise their family on a business. It might not start big, but it's a great way I think that's a great, that's great also to do that. So but yes, we do have businesses that are moving in and automatically just having 20, 50, 100 jobs that they're kind of adding to the economy.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, next slide. Keep going. Okay, so like I said, Bethany will be here to answer questions after the slides, but this is just basically a snapshot of our current vacancy rates, the Q4 vacancy rate for the office market. You see that there, it increased a little bit. The retail rate is actually doing really well. Like our retail rates across the county, like they're relatively low. We usually do a really good job with moving retail businesses in spaces. There's like that's a great area for our vacancy rates. Industrial vacancy has recently increased. I know the last, I would say about a year ago, it was really low. A couple of big businesses have like come online since then. People like so that's where you get to the increase of the 7.2%. Right now, from what I've been hearing in that industrial market, that sector, people are kind of like pausing a little bit in terms of like, we just had a new election, we have a new federal government, a lot of things that are just happening right now that are changing, and so people are kind of pausing on decision making. That's like moving into new spaces, people leasing out their spaces. So we'll just kind of have to keep an eye on that in the next year, but it's still, in the scheme of things, not a bad vacancy rate, because I think there is still demand for that sector. We have our flex space there, that's still remains relatively low, and then that's our total vacancy rate there. You see it.
Yeah, Jennifer, one of this is office, I guess both office and industrial, but special office, we have been hearing last few years in different places there, when the lease expire, some office there, because they have been either hybrid or shifting more to remote, like no longer renew the lease there. Do you see that happening here, or actually things started bounce back to some manner? Do you have any idea?
Well, I know Bethany could probably chime in there, but I do know people are getting less space, right? So companies that usually come in and will take,
the size of the space, I guess.
Yeah. So Bethany, if you want to chime in there, to give your observations.
Sure. Yeah, we are definitely still under the COVID effect of virtual work from home. We are very, very just now starting to hear people say they would like to come back and be with their colleagues. I think people are finally starting to see the benefit of collaboration in person. That will take a while to translate. People have gotten very comfortable about working, in their pajamas, so to speak. The vacancy is actually across the county a little bit higher than that number, and has held steady. But it is the office. She's right. Retail is fantastic. But yeah, we also have a large supply of Class B office space on the market, and the Class A is definitely the attractive sector right now. So yeah, to answer the original question, we still have a lot of folks considering coming back, whether or not to come back to the office, and it is still definitely a decision that folks are struggling with.
I've also heard from, I know Bethany has mentioned, and some other, people in the commercial real estate space have mentioned that everybody's watching what the federal government does. When they bring their workers back, it's probably going to trickle down and follow suit. I don't know if this is the case, but that's what I've been hearing too. And, that was just announced yesterday that they, the big push on federal workers to come back to in the office. So we'll see. I mean, over the next year, we'll probably see what that looks like.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I jump in and ask a question?
Sure,
Dr. Sun? This is Barb Glenn. Jennifer, thanks so much for this presentation. So looking at the chart or the table we were just looking at, I'm going back to your chart on the firm's growth. And I'm asking a specific question about one type of firm, which was natural resource and mining. And in that chart, there was a 67% increase in firms and 52% increase in employment. And then I was looking at your commercial real estate and trying to decipher, what is this industry here? Natural resources and mining. What is that?
So Zach, if you wanted to, do you have the subsectors that roll into that?
Sure. Yep. Yeah. That's going to be things like logging operation, mining operation. I don't believe pure agriculture falls into that. These numbers seem big at the bottom here, and typically we wouldn't even include them because it's such a small number that a small change in employment level or firms will drastically shift that percentage back and forth.
Yes.
So it's a little bit misleading, and for the sake of including all the industries, we've left it on there here. Yeah. So it wouldn't, to answer the question, it wouldn't fit into the commercial real estate breakout necessarily at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's helpful. And yes, I was wondering if agriculture was in there. So thank you so much.
I think Alan has a question too. Yes, thank you.
Sure.
Alan, did you have a question? You're muted.
Sorry, I wanted to follow up on this, on what you just said, and that these percentages, both for vacancy and for increases in companies or employees, are really do need a context in terms of real numbers. It would help if, in addition to the percentages, you actually had some idea of what that represents in terms of
the number.
So the numbers are on the right, if you see the absolute numbers.
This slide has number.
But the other one, the other one didn't. It just.
This one.
Yeah, it helps.
Yeah,
it helps just provide a better context for understanding what that actually means. Because our industrial space is fairly small, and so that increase, what does that actually represent in terms of helping to estimate what that means in terms of revenue impact, and both from employees in terms of earners here, and the others. So just to remember that there's always different ways in which to present data, and especially with people that aren't maybe used to working with it, to try and make sure that context is provided. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's a good point.
Okay, so I think the last.
Did Dr. Clinch, you have another question also? Yeah, go ahead.
I saw that manufacturing had traditionally done relatively well in the county, but you had a pretty recent declines. Is that one or two big firms leaving, say, Jessup, or is that a kind of sectorial, broad-based decline?
Sorry.
If you want to go ahead.
Jennifer, Richard, your first statement was correct. It was several larger firms downsizing and being acquired. That's driven a lot of that. We've actually seen in manufacturing, our larger firms have been struggling in the recovery period, post 2020, and our smaller firms have actually been doing better. So that's what we're seeing from the QWI data.
Thank you.
Thank you all. It's a great discussion.
I think we are on the commercial base. Oh, okay. So I think we were one slide back, but the commercial base slide, we'll go, yeah, right there. So this graph shows how much of Howard County's total taxable property base is derived from commercial and real property, and you see it's been held steady at about 17.4%. It just shows how much the commercial tax base is, keeping up with residential, and it's been pretty steady. It's always, the question I always get is, what do we need to do to increase the commercial tax base? And it's really, really difficult. So, right now we're really trying to do an analysis about look at areas in the county for opportunity. How can we even get to 1 percentage point higher? What do we need to kind of bring in? How do we help businesses expand? So it'll be a multi-pronged approach, but this just basically shows over the last several years, we've been pretty steady. Okay, and in terms of our activity, I alluded to it earlier. These are just some recent businesses that are moving in, expanding. So we see somebody asked before about some of the big businesses that are bringing in big jobs. So you see that second one, Infinity Payroll, HR Benefits, they're moving from another county into Howard County, and they're bringing in 100 jobs. And you see there's other businesses that have also come in, the new grocery outlet over in the Wild Lake Village Center, some childcare institutions. So like I said before, our attraction initiatives, we definitely focus on that. But a lot of what we also do is retention and expansion, making sure the businesses are here, can expand and grow the way they need to. And that because with the hybrid arrangement, businesses can be anywhere. They don't have to be, and they don't really see boundaries the way we do. So I would say the retention expansion is really also a big initiative of ours. Next slide. And then this is just some of our business development activity. Over the last fiscal year, There's been like 700 in total jobs that have been impacted. We've retained about 486 and 315 new jobs. So this is some of that economic growth we're talking about, job growth we're talking about. And then we've also have had a lot of about 1,700 or 1,600 technical assistance cases, and that can range from not just bringing businesses in, but businesses call us all the time about, can you help us with permitting? Can you connect us to this part of the county so I can talk about that? So it's just a lot of technical assistance that can range from helping them grow their employee base all the way to navigating county resources. So that's really important to retain businesses. Next slide. And then a big thing that we've noticed, obviously everybody has seen that, I've heard that childcare may be one of the factors that why a lot of the women have not come back to the labor force prior to, pre-pandemic levels. A lot of the women left. There's been, a lot of research done that some of that is due to childcare. And so with the county executive's office, we are rolling out childcare grants. We rolled these out, I believe, like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago. There are about 320 existing childcare facilities in the county, and these grants are to help with expansion. So this is helping adding new seats to the county so that people can put their, because right now there's like waiting lists, there's long waiting lists, and so people might be making the decision to stay at home with their children. So extra seats is what we need. So we're working with them to roll that out. And right now we have people filling out the application right now, and we'll in about a month or so we'll see how that is. But this is, I think, a really good initiative that the county executive has rolled out, and we're happy to support. And then this is our Catalyst Loan Fund. This is our fund that is that the money comes from the video lottery terminal money. That's the casino money. And we offer loans at lower interest rates than banks. And also we offer them to companies that may have a slightly riskier profile than what banks have an appetite for. So it's really important. This program is really important because it fills a gap that's in the market for companies that may not be, the criteria might not rise to the level of what a bank considers creditworthy. And so we give loans up to $500,000, and this is our Catalyst Loan Fund there. And the next slide. And then
hey, Jennifer, real quick on that.
Sure.
And then maybe it applies to the next slide as well. I'm not sure. What's your loss rate if it's higher risk borrowers at a lower interest rate? Is the lower interest rate offsetting the cost to the higher risk borrower in the sense that there's?
So we have actually a really low default rate because I want to say, and I can confirm this, I want to say like 2-3%. So even though the businesses may have a higher risk profile than what a bank looks at, we still vet them, and we have an underwriting process. And in cases where a business right away may not be like rise to our level, we kind of work with them over like a couple of months and say, hey, this is what we need from you. This is what we need to see over the next couple of months. So whereas the bank might say, hey, you're not ready, and turn them down, we kind of wrap around and we kind of work with them. Our team is great. Our business finance team is great. And oftentimes we might work with them for like months to get them ready, right? So I think that's important. That's the reason why our default rate is low. And then the next slide, also our microloan fund, which is the county executive has funded this program. It's our microloan program. We do these are loans up to $30,000. So these are small loans that banks aren't going to be, they don't want to fool with. It's a lot of work for them. It's a lot of work for us, but we feel like this was also a gap at the market. Like you want small loans to buy a piece of equipment or help with fit out or help you open. And these are also a riskier profile. And then banks normally have an appetite for, and that default rate is also low. So we pair them with a mentor. So we have mentors at EDA at our innovation center. So we pair them with our finance mentor, and we just work with them, like, hey, this is how you need to look at your financial statements. This is what you need to do. This is what we need to see. So these programs get businesses ready for a banking relationship. And so I think this is a really great program. Next slide. And so I talked about the Maryland Innovation Center. That's our innovation center here at EDA, where I talked about the mentors and wraparound services for these entrepreneurs. Some people have a passion for something, they're great at it, but that's different than actually building a business around, your passion. So a lot of people might not have experience with that. And so that's what the Innovation Center does. And we use the mentors that are there for our loan programs for people that need it. And the next slide. And then this is just some basic data on our HOCO Hire program, which the county executive also graciously funds. And this is our cohort program. So it could be, it's usually from, I would say, 6 to up to 10-week program. And each week they cover something different depending on what level. We have a startup level, a middle, like growth level, and then a CEO cohort. So, this program is what kind of helps that pipeline. Once people graduate from this program, they're able to hire new employees. They increase their payroll, their revenues increase, because a lot of times they just need the structure and be able to ask questions in a classroom format. And we bring in business owners that have been successful into the program to teach. And also I think the community. So if you're entrepreneurship is very lonely. So being around other entrepreneurs that may be going through the same thing is helpful also. The next slide. Is that?
I think that we missed a
That's the last
slide.
one.
If you go,
Oh.
I think we might have skipped one slide right before this.
This one? Or
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so this is just more of information about our MIC resident companies and the percentage that have added jobs. So we do our quarterly economic impact survey with these companies to we track their path and their entrepreneur. So from the time they intake to when they graduate from us, we do quarterly surveys and track their data, like how many people have you hired? Have your revenues increased? Have you raised funds? So this is basically helpful for us to make sure that we're providing the services that they need. And so you can see that 44% of them had revenue growth over the last quarter. 76% have added new customers. 28% have secured new funding investments, which is great. And then 65% of our business companies are minority-owned businesses. We really try to focus on underrepresented populations and making sure that we all, any kind of business owner from any background can start a business and be successful in the county.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I think Barb has a question.
Yeah, just a quick question, Jennifer. With respect to the Catalyst Loan Fund, that's at about 10.5 million. You mentioned, I think, that the funding comes from the lottery terminals. Is that correct?
Yeah.
What's your projection on the growth of that fund, the total pot, or what's going to happen with that?
So each year, the state runs the program with us, and then each county has a fund manager for this program. So we have a fund manager, and the state kind of says, this is the money we have available, and allocates the county money based on like size.
Okay.
And historically, we've always had enough funding. I mean, historically, and then we've always been really good at our cadence and using up the funds that we need. And once you use up the funds you have, they give you more money. You go, you're eligible to kind of like apply for more money. So I mean, I don't really have a number in terms of growth, but I know historically we've never had an issue with having enough funds available for this program.
Thank you. Good revenue source. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. I think we already asked you quite some questions there. Maybe we should give it to Christy and then to
I
talk
have one
about
question, Holly.
Oh, Josh, go ahead.
When you hear, it's actually two questions. When you hear from a potential business that they're moving to Anne Arundel or Montgomery or Frederick instead of Howard County, what's the top 1 or 2 reasons they give?
Mainly space availability. It's usually a business that's expanding and needs a lot of space, and we are, as you know, we're constrained with our, our land use. We're like, there's probably 3-4% of land availability. So it's usually a business that couldn't find enough space here in Howard County, to grow.
And then just locally for Howard County, are there any kind of fees or regulations or paperwork that we have that other counties or municipalities in Maryland or the area don't have that would inhibit people from starting a business here? And like, are any of those fees, if we have them, are they by size of business? Like,
I don't think that we have any, I don't think we have like fees. I haven't heard from businesses that like that's the reason why they're not moving here. Like it's because of we have paperwork or fees that other counties don't have. I mean, consistently
or anything
across the
like
board.
getting in the way of our own residents incorporating and starting something.
Right. No, I haven't heard anything like that. I mean, yeah. I did want to also, I mean, if nobody, I did also want to like just address one thing, and maybe Ryan can speak on this from Edwards Performance Solutions. We talked about, you know, what's our exposure with you know, federal contracting, and you know, there's a change in every time there's a change, you know, everybody kind of like looks at, well, you know, how are our federal contractors doing? We have a lot of them in this area. Are there some in Howard County? How are they kind of looking at the next, you know, on the horizon about what's going on, and has this affected, like the national landscape affected them locally? So I do want to kind of have him answer that question, because that was a question that was, that's a question that's been asked of me. So I don't know, Ryan, if you could speak to that.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. Ryan Miller from Edwards Performance Solutions. So the question is kind of an interesting one from an Edwards perspective. Edwards began in Howard County about 27 years ago. From the very beginning, one of the earliest opportunities for Edwards was with the Center for Medicaid Medicare Services, which is just over the border over in Woodlawn. So very easy access to participate in some, you know, really early small kind of work. Fast forward the tape, change of administration, maybe 15 years ago or so, brought the Affordable Care Act, and that created a humongous opportunity for Edwards. So the idea that when there's a change of administration, there's all kinds of changes, there's different kinds of ripple effects. I think Steve Edwards, our founder, would say that actually created a really neat opportunity for Edwards to step in, set up the project management office called a PMO, and then from there, you know, be involved in some pretty high level work, a lot of data analysis, a lot of reporting, helping to streamline operations. Those of you who remember that process in the state and nationally, it was pretty high profile work. And that led also to an opportunity to do more project management office work at CMS. They ultimately moved into what's now called the Innovation Center, the CMMI. And that's just become a really great base of work for other federal agencies. So with that in our background, I think Edwards is pretty optimistic about, well, you know, with changes comes new opportunities, sometimes those you just don't expect.
So Ryan, I want to follow up on that, because this time I think federal government was a little bit different. What we heard, again, there was a lot of uncertainty in the area, is like even day one or even before day one, it was already announced the intention of making major cost savings of federal government through cutting potentially contracts and employees. So again, it's probably too early to predict, but have your company hear anything like as potential impact, or you think it's very positive at this point?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Sun. You know, I think the community of other, you know, similar types of companies, both smaller, similar size, large, you know, there's optimism of opportunity. You know, Edwards specifically is, you know, Edwards Performance Solutions. It's a company that really is founded on project performance, you know, reporting, results reporting. So we know that there's going to be an increased focus on those things, you know, performance management, accountability, results reporting, those sorts of things. So uniquely, I think Edwards is pretty well positioned. But, you know, the neat thing about where we are in Maryland is within arm's reach are all kinds of sectors. So, you know, certainly there are some sectors that are probably a little bit more concerned than others. You know, the neat thing about where we are specifically is we kind of have access to all kinds of opportunities. There's obviously defense growth with the various you know, military installations around Howard County, but also biotech. And Maryland has a pretty interesting and probably under-discovered space business. You know, opportunities around space business. So biotech, healthcare, and all the ecosystems that support those. the businesses that are well diversified, that have opportunities and relationships within multiple sectors will probably fare better.
Thank you.
And then Christy, did you have other observations? I know we were going through the slides. I don't know if you wanted to jump in or just talk at the end. So.
Yeah, I was just going to share a couple of things we've been hearing from the business community that are less like statistical analysis, but kind of the word on the street. So some challenges and some successes that we've been working with our businesses on. So obviously, since COVID started, the way our businesses are operating has changed very drastically, which has required significant investments in things like education, advertising, technology, and employee training. We are hearing from our restaurants quite a bit that they are suffering really with no lunch crowd like they used to have, especially in downtown Columbia. And while most of the downtown Columbia buildings are leased up and the vacancy isn't terrible, like we've discussed, with so many staff members either teleworking full-time or even part-time, it's just had a huge impact on the restaurants in Columbia, but also as well as in Maple Lawn and other surrounding areas. Our retailers are saying their sales are still down, and they're making renewed efforts to get people back into stores. They're also feeling some stress with their rent and lease payments since they're experiencing lower sales in many cases, and then increased costs for goods and employees, benefits, and energy prices and everything else. As Jennifer went over, there's the childcare lack of availability. So we fully support the county program to open and expand more facilities. An example is Fort Meade has hundreds and hundreds of kids on the waiting list to get into childcare facilities, which often keeps the military spouses out of the workforce. So as far as jobs go, we do have businesses that are still struggling to fill open positions. But on the more positive side, a lot of our businesses are reporting that, they're not struggling as bad as they were previously with filling positions. They're getting more applications. Response time is quicker, and they're able to fill the jobs a little quicker, which has been great. Turnover is still a little higher than they prefer, of course, but it's better than it was immediately following COVID. We are also hearing, as previously mentioned, that businesses are calling employees back to the office either full-time or a few days a week. And some employees are also choosing to come back to the office just because they prefer it and kind of miss the interaction of being in the office. Some businesses are being really creative right now, addressing problems like transportation that they're having issues with, and some businesses are running their own shuttles to their offices, picking up employees in surrounding counties to literally bring them to work to fill their vacancies, which has been a creative solution we're hearing more about. Supply chain issues have lessened, and just in general, businesses are really, really happy to be in Howard County. We have a great quality of life, educated workforce. Things like the roads are well maintained. The government is so supportive. Jennifer and her team at EDA provide a great deal of support, and we work in very close partnership to make sure we can address all the needs the business community may have. And the different departments within the community are really fairly responsible for the most part, and they're problem solvers. So they're getting issues taken care of for the businesses that are either coming to the county and launching or expanding. So yeah, Howard County is a good place to be. Our businesses are happy to be here, and things are improving from what I'm hearing. So I'll stop there. I know we want to have some time for other questions to the business panel, Bethany and Ryan.
Thank you very much, Christy.
Yeah, and one question I did want to ask for Bethany, if you wanted to look out 2 to 5 years, and how do you see the real estate market evolving in terms of vacancy rates? I mean, you don't have a crystal ball, but just basically what you're seeing now and the trends over the last couple of years, what can you tell us?
Okay, so vacancy, which we've talked about this internally at McKinsey, because we obviously this is our business, but we do see things holding somewhat steady. The next 6 months will be very telling with the new administration and all of the changes, economic policy, and labor issues, federal government coming back to work. We think that everyone's very optimistic that will spur a change for us locally. supply chain issues, construction costs are still making things difficult and making things very expensive. It's somewhat of a barrier to entry for small companies looking to occupy space. Some of our, if those things can ease, we're concerned about the tariffs. As we talked about earlier, the industrial sector has pulled back, and that has a number of reasons, among them the port strike, the uncertainty of the tariffs, the collapse of the bridge. So, there are just a number of things that we're not sure of just yet, but the next 6 months really could prove out to sort of open things up. Labor, I don't know how much, again, from this construction standpoint, labor may be impacted by deportation issues. We're not sure. But we're also optimistic that, again, this back to office with federal government is really going to, spur a lot of companies just to be a little more brave about demanding that this occur. The daycare issue, I've certainly heard that one before. Had companies, woman-owned companies that have said, I cannot pull the trigger on this because I've got so many female employees that are up against this challenge. But that was 3 years ago. We lost a major tenant over that. And that should hopefully be easing too. I'm very glad to hear about this daycare program. So as far as 2 to 5 years, I think we will see slow, steady growth, which hopefully will be aided by some new policies, federal and local.
I'll ask Ryan and Bethany, you can chime in too. Is there anything that, the county or locally, like EDA or just the county in general, could be doing to assist with your, I think Steve has a question, but to assist with any of this stuff? What can we be doing better? So I'll pose that to both of you guys. Ryan,
I think you guys are doing well with your loan programs. That I know several of the tenants I've worked with are in contact with your office and doing very well. Those are definitely helpful. Other than that, I mean, it's really at the state level. We compete on the business tax side with Pennsylvania and Virginia. And that's more of a statewide issue, but it does filter down to the county as well. So I think we're all aware of what that means. But as many as incentives and programs that we can offer and making people aware of them, I find that I do point people to your office to help take advantage of these programs. So I think you guys are doing a fantastic job. I really do. I appreciate the collaboration that we get from you. Oh, somebody did mention this before as well. Permitting. I know we've talked, Jennifer, in our small groups about permit timing. That is another barrier for small tenants. You typically don't come to the market until a few months before they need to occupy. And if space needs to be built, that definitely adds a couple of months to the process, and often it just doesn't work. So I don't know. We've got these hurdles. They're the same hurdles we always have. They're just magnified in different ways at this point in the economy. And again, the new administration could prove, beneficial to all of this employment situation.
I'll echo what Bethany's just said. It's a great place to start, run, grow a business. Two pieces to this. One is, some of you know that I was formerly Howard County's emergency manager until about 5 years or so ago. And then honestly, I met Steve Edwards at the wall breaking event for the MIC. It actually just dawned on me earlier on this call, like actually this is kind of the beginning of my second part of my story, was getting to know the MIC, when it was being launched. And I truly benefited from through the resources through economic development and their various trainers and sessions and mentors and such. The chamber, the events, I mean, just a great place to learn and grow. The Fort Meade Alliance is another. So personally, kind of really became equipped to do what I'm doing now for Edwards, which is to launch a new solution area called organizational resilience. And so, it's kind of neat to kind of look back at those 5 years. Now, as far as sort of what the county can be doing, I mean, you really have a great ecosystem of partners and resources. Again, we're in downtown Columbia in the Meriwether District, lots of amenities and great resources. Something we were talking about the other day in our office was Howard County has always been a leader on kind of like neat, innovative, bold solutions. Going way back, some of you might remember the very beginning of the One Maryland Broadband Project. The kind of epicenter of that was Howard County. Some really neat cybersecurity initiatives have been at Howard County. So we really have to kind of like really start to think about something that you could be doing better. One of them might be just like when those ideas are starting and those programs are beginning, just to, just bring us in early, share them through the chamber, through economic development, because there's a lot of really innovative and often small businesses that would love to be part of those kinds of solutions, because some of them really are changing not just the county, but the state and even the country. So, but keep up the good work. And I honestly, I'll just say, I'm often directing people back to county government saying, well, have you talked to the county about that? Like, they're very receptive to your feedback. They actually really want to hear from you. So, and directing folks to the chamber and economic development as well. A lot of folks just don't really realize how accessible you really are. And you are accessible.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and also very nice to see you again. I have seen two hands up, so I want to make sure, Steve Hunt, you get a chance to ask a question, and followed by Barb. Thank you. You unmuted, Steve. Try again. I think you're still muted.
No?
Try one more time.
I think we can hear you now.
Oh, can you hear me, Jennifer?
Yeah, it's good. Go ahead.
Sorry, a little delay on my end. I was just going to say thank you, Jennifer and team, for the presentation. Good stuff here. Heard a couple of references to, talked about vacancy rates, availability. I believe it answered to one of Josh's questions as far as people leaving the county was availability of space. Have you guys factored in or done any sort of projections of what the impact would be of the implementation of the Gateway Master Plan, how that might be a positive in terms of making, creating more availability to attract more businesses? Also, that's a really good location vis-a-vis of Fort Meade. I heard a reference to that. I know there's certainly a lot of government action down there at Meade, NSA, et cetera. So just wanted to get you all's insight if you've developed that in terms of the impact of the Gateway Plan.
So I know the Gateway Plan and the Master Plan in general does take into account like where are the developable areas that are, over the next decade or two. And so, yes, we are taking that into consideration. I mean, Gateway, I'm optimistic, and I think the Gateway Plan is has loads of opportunity for exactly what you're talking about. We're trying to turn this into an innovation district, making sure that businesses here have there's programs and programming, and there's a collaboration in this district. So I don't have like specific numbers and like percentages, but I'm sure like in the actual Gateway Plan, they do have a projection of what they're trying to do with the businesses and the density here. So I think that is the Gateway area, I believe, is like one of the best untapped potentials in the region. So I'm definitely looking forward to, EDA is working with DPZ and Howard County Exec's office on this, and I'm very excited about this program. So yes, I agree with you. And we are actually, there's like several sections on economic mobility and economic impact for the Gateway Master Plan and the general plan. And so we are very entrenched in that.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that.
I think Barb was next.
Barb has a question.
Just a quick question. Ryan, I appreciated that you mentioned opportunities, and we are a great ecosystem. Bethany, you commented on the tariff challenges, our infrastructure, ports and bridges. But my question is about trying to attract international businesses through international trade. Do we work with the Department of Commerce and Agriculture with respect to those entities? I've always thought Central Maryland was so attractive for so many international businesses.
So I can answer part of that. We actually do. We actually just came back from, this is We worked with the county exec's office to do international trade mission to Europe. We were there in October. Now the mission that we were on was cyber. We took some cyber companies from here that were in a position where they've grown. They're very successful, but they've never ever considered international growth and international markets, and that's a big opportunity that's on the table. So we did that in October, and I look forward to future trade missions where we're focused on other industries like manufacturing, agri-food, that type of thing. But I definitely think that international market is a big opportunity. We have our own international program here at EDA. So we have in those trade missions, and then I have a person, my business development team person, Bob Zhang, who's focused on recruiting international companies here, giving them a launching pad at our innovation center. We work with Department of Commerce on all of this. They have an international division that's great. And then giving them like 6 months to a year to kind of launch into the county.
Excellent, thanks. So yeah, outbound missions are great, but inbounds too. You can bring them in, Jennifer.
Yeah, it was both ways. Both ways.
Yeah, we can have all kinds of business coming here. Thank
you.
you.
We bring companies there, and then we also recruiting companies to come here.
Okay, thanks so much. Glad you're doing that.
Thank you very much. Again, thanks our panelists for coming in today. Share very important perspective from business perspective, and also Jennifer and also Christy for organizing and also for serving the business community here. So before we adjourn, just a reminder next week that we will hear another important speaker, two important speakers from our own committee. One is Dr. Clinch is going to give a presentation about economic outlook with a focus on Howard County. And also, I think Jimmy Jennings from the Realtors Association of the county is going to share some information about the status and trend of the real estate market. So both are going to be informative related to our forming our recommendations there. So thank you very much. If no other business, I will announce the meeting is adjourned, and we'll see you, hopefully, most of you next week. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Nolan.
Thank you.
Thank you.